look who it is. Welcome back to the Football Diary podcast once again. I'm joined by Dave and the return of John today, which is great to see. Obviously, we've seen the managerial merry-go-round going out of control already. So Dean Smith is one of the hot topics, which we'll actually give Myles his say on later. But first of the agenda, I think, today, let's give West Ham their moment in the spotlight, shall we? What an incredible win against Liverpool, 3-2 at home. Third in the table now. This isn't a fluke anymore, is it, John? Welcome back, first of all.
Thank you.
Talk through the Hammers season to date, because, I mean, last season they were great, but they continued it. This isn't a fluke, is it? This is a proper good team they're building now.
Yeah, I spoke a lot the last few times I'd been on around the kind of performances, the identity of the team, that there's a clear direction. Everyone's got their instruction, they're sticking to it, and they look very disciplined. But they've also got quite a big mix of talent in there. Fornals and Ben Rama, I think, need a mention for sure this season. Bowen's been phenomenal. Antonio goes about saying his stats are absolutely outrageous. Getting Zuma from Chelsea, big signing, really solid at the back. Kind of got their Premier League team and then the European team, but there's still a lot of the people that play on the Thursday are playing on a Sunday, so they don't really seem to lose too much of their flow. But saying that it's, not a fluke anymore, it's got to be agreed. I mean, if you look at some of the stats, I think it was Man City, since New Year's Day, Man City have like 87 points, Chelsea 67 and West Ham have 62 or something, 63. That's right. It's about right. I don't think that's entirely accurate, but it's there or thereabouts. So it goes to show that nearly a year's worth of form, that they're the third best team at the moment if you look for the full calendar year in the Premier League, and that's something to be really proud of.
Yeah,
we spoke about the break in COVID and how that has kind of affected teams differently, and it seems that the London Stadium's gone from a bit of it's not Upton Park, a bit of a toxic atmosphere, to everyone's really behind the team. I mean, you saw the atmosphere at the weekend was mad.
Brilliant.
Like, they won't stop singing the whole time. Like, we're cheering everything. It was, it feels a bit more like a proper stadium now, and the fans are really giving it. So fair play, because they are fickle. I've said this before. If we lost, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people like, we should have beaten Liverpool, we'd be third or whatever, and still a lot of people being unhappy. But great to watch them from a neutral perspective. They score a lot of goals or are involved in games with loads of goals. Lots of talking points in pretty much every game. I mean, what a time. As I said before, when you have you on, what a time to be a West Ham fan. I mean, it's some really, really good stuff. And I'm sure you gents would agree, and most of the general public, that, if you're banging in loads of goals and playing reasonably entertaining football, or that the team are going to hit heavy on the counter-attack and look good doing it, at least it's an entertaining watch, and that's all people really want to see, whether you're a neutral.
Yeah, I think against Liverpool, obviously, we take great pleasure in seeing Liverpool taking any kind of beating. But this West Ham team seems to have like a team of players, a core of players that has settled into quite an easy pick starting 11, hasn't it, really? And all of the players are consistent, like 7, 8 out of 10s every single week. Yeah. So I think that alone is kind of the way David Moyes has got his team set up now. He's got such a consistent and identifiable team, like you said, that every time you play West Ham, you kind of know what you're coming up against. But yet they can't counteract that. Liverpool couldn't deal with it. The counter was so slick, it was unreal. And in Declan Rice, they've got probably the best midfielder in the country at the minute. Him and Jared Bowen have just been unplayable, really. But I'm going to get Dave's perspective on West Ham, Dave, because they were brilliant to watch, weren't they, against Liverpool? How did they win, first of all?
First of all, I think it's worth noting that I'd say it's quite surprising how they're balancing European duties. They're actually, performing really well in Europe at the moment, obviously, this time round, and they're showing some consistency in the league and in Europe. So I think that's, you've got to give credit to the team for that, and they're making full use of their squad. The squad's actually stronger than it was last year, and I feel as though they're kind of finding a balance and being able to rotate in certain games. And they're actually, it's not as we've seen with Leicester this year in Europe. The performances have been a bit topsy-turvy, and there's not really been any of that from West Ham. West Ham have actually done really well so far. So you've got to give credit to the manager for that, I feel. The game itself, I feel as though, West Ham definitely targeted Liverpool in certain situations. Set pieces was one of them. Obviously, Alisson, it seems that he was targeted, and they benefited from that. So, but the intensity that they play at now, West Ham, is, I think, one thing you can say is that they actually transition really quickly, and we've spoke about it. I mean, even towards the end of last year, it was evident from the performances they had at the end. And fair play, we had a lot of people saying, "Oh, they've lost Lingard now." He was obviously, instrumental in their kind of surge towards the end of last season, but it's not really hampered them in any way. And I mean, I'm sure Jesse Lingard will be thinking now, actually, I wish I'd have gone with the way they're going at the moment. So the game itself, it was a brilliant game to watch, for the neutrals. You've got to give credit, because I feel on another season, I feel as though that West Ham team could have potentially capitulated when Liverpool got that goal in the last, 10 minutes. It kind of made it a bit more interesting again. But yeah, they held their nerve, and I feel as though I'd say that could be a turning point for them, really, because personally, when they scored that second goal, I thought it's a matter of time now before, they get the equaliser and then potentially go on to win it. But they had a lot of resolve, and it was really admiring to see, actually.
Yeah, I think the performance and, like you said, the resolve to see out the game is a big stride from where West Ham were last season. We saw some absolute thrillers involving the Hammers last season for the wrong reasons, like comebacks that shouldn't have happened and capitulations and things like that. Didn't look like happening. I mean, there was a few Liverpool scares, I think, in the last few minutes, but I still thought West Ham defended pretty admirably. So what's changed, John, this season? What's the difference between how they did fold sometimes last season and now? Because personnel-wise, still looks fairly consistent. So what do you see differently from a fan's point of view? There's
competition for places, for sure, which we've never really had before. So I think that naturally is going to elevate people's games. Like you look at Ben Johnson, we mentioned kind of Bowen and Antonio and the players that are fantastic, like Rice. But he's come in as, like a young academy player and been absolutely superb. And I know Soufal's had a couple of little niggly injuries, but he's not getting back in the team. And Johnson played on Thursday as well, and has played again on Sunday. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to look at and just admire with mentality. It's not about necessarily the most talented group of players. They all know what they're doing, and I think they just do it really well. Let's be real. Declan Rice, technically, if you were to put him against a lot of really good midfielders, he isn't technically like absolutely unbelievable, but he does a lot of things very, very well, very consistently. As you already said, he's probably at the minute, if not the best, one of the best midfielders in the Premier League for what he does in that position. Let's be real about the game as well. The first half, West Ham were great. They had a very good start. They petered off. Liverpool then scored the free kick. So team talk, I would imagine, would have been pretty feisty and a bit of heart in there, a bit of desire. Like, what are you about? Like, show the fans and yourselves, looking over the rest of your teammates. Like, what are you about? Do you want to give it? Do you want to actually be in the mix? And if you do, you've got to win games like this, or at least get something out of it. And they've come out and delivered for the next 45 minutes. So fair play. VAR's been, I know, a talking point as well. Personally, I don't think Cresswell should have been sent off. I think Liverpool fans think he should have been. If Henderson had made a bigger deal about it, fair play that he didn't, maybe they would have had a slightly different opinion. But he got up reasonably quickly. He wasn't rolling around on the floor for ages. Maybe that sort of helped a little bit. But, he's bounced off the top of the ball and literally just, grazed his knee. It's not like he's gone flying in at knee height to, endanger or injure an opponent. That wasn't the matter at all. So I do think they're right. The Alisson foul wasn't. I think it was fairly contested. So, these are the times where VAR does work out. And I know that a lot of Liverpool fans would probably be salty about it. But if it was West Ham, I would probably be the same, because you've got the personal pride around your club. But if you try and look at it from a neutral perspective, it's just one of those things that, I think Tech done the right job in the end.
Yeah, well, like you say, bags of energy, really well organised, and a little bit of luck thrown in. And that's the kind of result they've pulled out of the bag. Really impressive. But the question is, I think Dave touched on it, there's a European charge as well going on. So what are West Ham's ambitions this season? I know David Moyes was asked after the game, is the title realistic? You're only a few points off the top spot. I mean, that's a stretch, I think, with the squad they've got and with Europe as well. But what are they going for? Are they going to look at Europe and go, do you know what, we're one of the favourites for this now? Or do you think they're going to look at top four and go, we could do that, we could take that?
When they lost in the 90th minute against Brentford at home, we've not lost since that game. We drew in Man City in the Cup, let's not forget. And they did play a pretty strong team. I know that they're obviously, anything out of their starting 11 is ridiculous anyway. Beat them on penalties. I just think they now have this belief and energy they can keep on going. I think it'll be interesting to see for the run over Christmas. There's a few tough games in there. City again, Wolves away, a couple of other niggles that aren't easy games by any stretch of the imagination. So if they get to Christmas and they're actually cemented top four, then that's got to be the aim. That has to be now anyway, but very quickly we can see things turn around. Look at Arsenal. They were very bad at the start of the season. They've gone on this crazy run that people aren't really mentioning, but they're only, I think, 4-5 points off the top themselves. So, it's just, if there is a knockback, they need to react like they have, stay disciplined, nick a couple of 1-0 wins, build the confidence back up and just keep going. I think the fact they've had a bit of a superb run in Europe, the Genk result was unfortunate, obviously, with the own goal, but both teams are quite solid. It was a bit end-to-end, a bit more open than I guess I was used to watching. To be honest, with West Ham, they've been a bit more disciplined than that. But at the same time, Genk really went for it. They've had a turn in their fortunes. So I think just mentality, consistency, staying positive. You can see them all. One thing I'm not mentioning, they're all smiling. All of them on the pitch are having a laugh, but when they've got to get stuck in, you can see they look really serious and they don't want to give an inch. So they're really enjoying their football, but they've got a bit of grit this time. And I think that, like Dave said, would have folded or capitulated previously and conceded in the 94th minute, 3-3 draw against Liverpool. Okay, you kind of take it before the game started, but bit of a bitter taste. That's not there. They're absolutely buzzing.
Yeah, it's a wild ride at the minute, isn't it? Being a West Ham fan for the last couple of seasons, it's been entertaining, like you said, to say the least. And that's kind of down to one man, and that's David Moyes. So, yeah, he's definitely got that team well drilled. There's a certain team in the Premier League that could do with a manager like David Moyes at the minute. Weird how things work out, isn't it? But speaking of managers and management changes, my God, what a week it's been for this managerial merry-go-round. It's been a fast turnaround of managers. I think 5 have gone now already after 11 games. That's a quarter of the Premier League's managers out of the door before December. So absolutely crazy. I mean, Daniel Farke at Norwich we kind of expected, but Dean Smith, we've not got Myles here today, but he's got his say, of course, on the Dean Smith situation and why he's sad to see the guy go.
To be honest, I sit here today pretty gutted. We have this channel and we set up this podcast because we are massive football fans. But of course, within that, we have our own affinities and we have things that mean a lot to us. The club that really means something to me is Aston Villa. To be honest, I can kind of cut and paste some of the things that I said when Grealish left. These days, there is a bit of a disconnect between fans and the clubs. For the last few years, it didn't feel that way at Villa. The biggest part of that was an incredible manager in Dean Smith, who was one of us in so many ways. He embodied exactly what the club wanted to represent. He was ambitious in what he wanted to do. And it wasn't just a case of taking a job for a payday. This was his dream. Just before Smith took the Villa job, someone interviewing him asked him, why would you want to take the Villa job? It seems that when managers go to Villa, they rarely move on to better things. It's killed a lot more careers than it's developed. His response was, that's because there is no better job than Aston Villa. And that mentality was exactly what Villa needed. We were in a horrible place when Dean Smith took over. We had fallen to mid-table obscurity in the Championship, looking like nothing really, and fearing fading into almost non-existence at times, literally in terms of financially at one point, but also in the mould of kind of your Sunderlands, your Nottingham Forests, even Leeds to an extent for a while, where you fall off the pyramid for a while after a spell of success and a spell of notoriety, and all of a sudden Aston Villa Football Club, one of the biggest clubs in the country, undoubtedly, were nothing for a while. And along with that, the process that got us there was so disheartening for Villa fans. And we watched our club fall apart under really misguided stewardship, both at boardroom level and in the dugout, that when Dean Smith came in, this fresh-minded, attacking philosophy, good gentleman in the game who had been successful at Brentford, but also had this affinity with Villa already, well, that lifted the whole place. Very few successful clubs could turn around and say that their captain and their manager were boyhood Aston Villa fans. And we had that for a while. And even after Grealish left, we maintained that in Smith. And the connection that Smith had with the fans was hugely based on that. He was just a great bloke who cared about the football club and worked like he cared. This isn't a guy who's only got the job because he's a fan. He's an incredibly good manager. He was someone that we were talking about not too long ago was, could he be an England manager one day? He's someone that helped develop this squad, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Along with all of that, the prize really was the fact that we could connect. This is a guy whose father was a steward at the club, and he used to go to Villa Park, and he always aspired to play for them, and he never reached that in his playing career. So this really was his opportunity and something that really meant something to him, and he took it and flew with it, in my opinion. I look back at Smith's reign at Villa, and the things that he brought us as a fan base are just outstanding. We had the 10-game winning run in our championship season when we got promoted. In his first season with us, he's still learning the squad. And we really thought that season was over. We weren't expecting anything. We thought Smith would get a summer to invest and then go for the championship the next year. And instead, he just turned it around that quickly. He developed everyone that was there. The coaching staff that were there learned under him. The players, they just became a different group all of a sudden. And as people, they just seemed to improve. And the connection they had with the fans improved. And the atmosphere improved. Everything was better. And we went on that incredible run. And then we had the playoff semi-final. And we had that moment where we knock out West Brom. And Smith was there to celebrate it. And then we move on to a final. And seeing Smith lead Villa out at Wembley, knowing what it meant to him and having Grealish behind him too, was just incredible as a fan. It gives you that warmth and that connection to the game that we've been missing for so long, when we had Remy Gard in charge, or Alex McLeish, or Roberto Di Matteo, people that really we never really cared about as a fan base. We had players there just picking up a paycheck, considering it their retirement project, and not putting anything into it. Now we saw what passion really did for our game and for our club. And that playoff final was fantastic. We deserved the win, and we were back where we should be, ahead of schedule, with Smith there. He was the one that managed to guide us there. And then in that first season, it wasn't always great. It was really hard, in fact. But we had moments. We had some incredible performances and some great goals. And then, of course, that scramble for the last sort of 4 games of the season, where it looked like we were down. We were relegated, and they pulled it out of the bag. Some amazing results. We turned it around and did what no one kind of expected us to do. And then from there, that was the platform that we needed. We invested incredibly well, brought in players that had the right character and right mentality for this squad, and they bought into the dressing room and bought into Smith's philosophy, and we had a fantastic season. We had moments in that season that were incredible. We beat Liverpool 7-2. All of a sudden, we can go and beat the likes of Man United. We can beat Arsenal 3 times on the bounce. That's where we were. Things like the promotion, things like the survival, things like getting to a cup final as well, by the way, really progressed that team spirit. And at the heart of it was a guy who was guiding these players to be better individuals on and off the pitch, coming up with a great system for us to play and organising a brilliant back room. That's what Smith did for the club. Stabilised us again. Gave it back to the fans. I've been a Villa fan for many years now, and there's not been a manager in my lifetime that I've enjoyed watching as much as Dean Smith. For the style of play, for the connection, for what they've achieved. He is my favourite Villa manager that I've ever seen, and I am gutted to see him go. The decision to let him go is a hard one to swallow. I can understand it in some ways. Obviously, we've lost 5 games in the bounce, and the last thing we want to do is be back in a relegation fight. Along with that, across the last 36 games, we've only picked up 40 points, and that is worrying. But I don't know if there's a manager out there that has a better chance of turning that around than Dean Smith. And really this season, he's had so much to contend with. He obviously lost John Terry and Richard O'Kelly in the summer, two of his biggest influences in his backroom staff, really. He lost Grealish, which, how does any club cope with losing a player of that quality? And then he's been trying to bed in new signings who are also coming back from injuries. People like Leon Bailey, we've not seen 100% fit. We've not seen the best of Emi Buendia. Danny Ings is injured at the moment as well. So very rarely has he had a full strength squad to pick from. This little slide, could Smith have been allowed it as a grace? And had he got enough credit in the bank to kind of try and turn it around afterwards? I think he earned that. I think the fans would have appreciated that. It's very rare that a manager leaves your club and you see the level of sadness behind it that Villa are feeling today. And this isn't a guy who's leaving because he's been offered a better job. He's been sacked. Every Villa fan is gutted for him. He conducted himself in such a way that we can be proud of as a club that it's hard not to fall in love with him as a manager. He gave Villa everything that we have wanted for a really long time. And the dream was to see him and Grealish, sadly, take us into Europe and kick us onto that next stage, which we have the infrastructure for. We could do if we continue investing and continue with the project, because it's been more than just a good run of results and good character. You look at the development of that squad that Dean Smith has overseen, not only in terms of the players that we've brought in and the likes of Ollie Watkins and Matty Cash and the signings that he has made even this summer, but how he's helped players progress. Now, you have to think about where this Villa squad is at now. If you'd said 5 years ago, that we'd have players that were internationals for Argentina, Brazil, England, it would never have happened. And yet all of a sudden, Smith has coached these players and developed these players enough that Tyrone Mings, Ollie Watkins, Jack Grealish are getting in the England squad. Emi Martinez has gone on from being an Arsenal reserve to being Argentina's undisputed number one and one of the best goalkeepers in world football. We've got Douglas Luiz in the Brazil squad. Everyone at that club can owe him a debt of gratitude. Their careers are undoubtedly in a better place than they were when he got there. And along with that, think about the academy players that he's starting to bring through. Jacob Ramsey is a regular feature for now for Aston Villa. Cameron Archer this season is doing the same thing. He's invested in youth. And the way that Villa have built an infrastructure around their academy now was missing for years. But Dean Smith is clearly instrumental in helping that build and helping the club progress to where they should be. So to see him go, it's gutting. It really is. It was hard to accept Grealish moving on, but you could understand it a lot more because a new opportunity came at a very high level and he deserved that. For Smith to be sacked, it leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. And now this isn't me saying I'm outraged at the board, because as I said, the results haven't been good enough and football is ruthless and every decision they've made thus far has been really productive for the club. But all the same, I know I'm going to miss him. When you saw Smith talk about what Villa meant to him and his family, and when he talked about the experiences he had with his dad as a child and also in the later life of his dad, and hearing his mom talk about him and seeing that connection, well, that's what every fan experiences with Villa. I talk to my granddad about Aston Villa every single time I see him or talk to him, because that's at the forefront of our bonding almost, because that's what this club can be. So to have someone who gets that, can you name another Premier League club that has that right now? I can't think of anyone that is as invested as Smith and Grealish were in our club, and then Smith this season. I don't know, I feel like I could go on for hours really talking about how much Smith will be missed. I think the main thing from me and from any Villa fan is just thank you. I really want to just run into Dean Smith and buy him a beer, to be honest. Smith gave us so much. That's something I'll never forget, and something I'm really, really happy I got to witness. Dean Smith can leave with his head held high, with so much credit in the bank, with so much love from Aston Villa fans, that I can't be the only one that just wants to thank him today. I don't know who I want next. I want Dean Smith next. I think he's the best manager available. Some of the names linked, Steven Gerrard, I think, although he's doing a good job at Rangers, I don't think I've seen enough of him to think that he's a good manager and at that level. The other names being linked, Roberto Martinez is a better manager than the last time we saw him in the Premier League, definitely. However, you wonder whether club management is where his head is at. I've read Ralph Hasenhüttl, who I think is a really interesting candidate because I think he has got something about him. I think he has a good philosophy. He's clearly a good footballing mind, but also I think he struggles to get that across to players sometimes. And that's why we've seen Southampton kind of fail to live up to the promise that they've had at times. There's obviously talk of the current Denmark manager who did wicked things in the Euros, but there isn't an obvious appointment to me. And I hope that the club have someone in mind. Who's the obvious candidate to take over Aston Villa right now? Well, I would want someone with a proven record at developing players and helping young players progress. I would want someone who has been at a club who have been successful in their scouting. I want someone who is going to buy into the philosophy of the club and that squad. And there's only one obvious name for that, and we've just sacked him. I just want Smith back. The 3 years that we had under Smith were wonderful. I will back and support whoever comes in, even if it's Steven Gerrard and his affiliations with Liverpool. Whoever it is, I'll continue supporting Aston Villa and be really proud to. And it's a lot easier to do that when we're in such a good place, and we owe so much of that to Dean Smith. So I'm going to miss him. I wish he'd stayed a bit longer, but fair play, mate. And any Villa fans that have anything but positive things to say about Dean Smith, they've got rocks in their brain. So well done, Dean Smith, and thank you for giving us Aston Villa back, really.
So the managerial changes, guys. Dave, I'll start with you. Daniel Farke at Norwich is gone. Kind of not a surprise, but a bit strange timing after the back of his first win of the season against Brentford. So a little bit of a sick joke there they've played on him, I feel, because I think we've talked about Norwich. They didn't show a huge amount of ambition this season, did they? So where they go from here, I don't know. But then also the appointments of Conte, and I think Eddie Howe's been confirmed at Newcastle now. What's your thoughts on this crazy week we've had, Dave?
Well, unlike other clubs, it seems that some clubs have plans in place. It doesn't seem as though the Norwich move was, it wasn't instinctive. It seems as though they'd earmarked this international break, make a change. So I don't feel as though it's, obviously it can leave on a bittersweet note, I suppose you could say. It's never nice for a manager to lose their job, but I almost felt as though Norwich rather kind of resigned to going down this season. They'd allow Farke to get them back up because we've seen him do it. He's done it twice now. And then they might look at potentially getting a new manager in and look at thinking, is there another way we can tackle the Premier League? Because he didn't just seem to quite have the ideas to make them, they're too easily beatable. That's the only thing. And the last few results over the last few weeks, the amount of goals they've conceded, particularly the game against Chelsea, it's just almost getting, it's going back to the days when you were seeing teams like Sheffield United, Derby County, Sunderland at times. It was resigned to defeat week after week, and it was getting to that point. So it doesn't surprise me that they've got rid of him, but I didn't know if they were brave enough to make that decision now. Maybe they almost feel like they had nothing to lose, almost, because they've been in this situation before. They were almost resigned to going down halfway through the season. The last time they were in the Premier League, they were rooted to the bottom. So in terms of Norwich, I feel like it's potentially not really as much of a brave move as you think it could be. But I feel as though it might work out for them. But I suppose we'll see. In terms of Eddie Howe, I feel as though going from talks with Emery and apparently getting rejected by Zidane to Eddie Howe is a bit of it's kind of a bit of a drop down in terms of profile, but I feel as though he did well with Bournemouth in the Premier League, and Newcastle are all of a sudden on another stage now because of their takeover, so it'd be interesting to see how he works with that. But it'd be interesting to know sort of what expectations are on him, really, because I think we're a little bit sort of in the dark over that, and I'm sure the supporters are sort of not really knowing what to expect either. So he's got a challenge, that's for sure. You know, the way Newcastle are playing at the moment, they were fortunate against Brighton. Brighton should have been absolutely out of sight in that game. Probably 3-0 half time, and nobody would have said that wouldn't have been an unjust score. So, he's definitely got a fight on his hands there. What do you think to that, Mike, in terms of?
Eddie Howe, I think, is probably where they're at the minute. That's the thing. They're in a relegation scrap, aren't they, at the end of the day? So attracting a high-profile manager who is most likely going to play in the Championship next season is impossible. So, I mean, it looks bad on Eddie Howe because he's probably just going to be a stopgap manager for the time being. I can't see them spending much money in January. And if they do, it won't be on big names. It'd probably be like fringe players that are missing out on first-team football at big clubs at the minute. So I still think they'll be relegated. I said that at the start. I don't think I'm going to change that now.
I think maybe they're a bit conflicted and maybe they're being a bit smart about it, because Eddie Howe, you know, even if they get relegated and if he shows a little bit, you know, that he's working with the squad and working with the team and they still go down, they may think that he's, you know, he can get them back into the Premier League. So, I mean, I suppose it's a bit of a funny one, because you think he's not the end goal for Newcastle as a Newcastle manager, really, is it? So it's, you know, he must be thinking in the back of his mind, you know, I'm probably only going to be here a couple of 2-3 years potentially.
Yeah, if he's lucky. But I think that's as much for his progression as anything. I think he was one of those names that was talked about as like the future of English football, potential future England manager. You know, a few top 4 clubs were sort of saying that's the kind of direction we want to go in. So he was at his peak in Bournemouth, quite highly regarded. So Newcastle is just one of them challenges for him, I think, to get him back in the game, because I think he was linked to Celtic for a while, wasn't he? But couldn't agree on his backroom staff or something like that. So it's good to see him back. He's still a really young guy. He still looks younger than me, to be honest. So, you know, for him to be out of the game for so long and still look relatively fresh, you know, he's got a lot to offer. I'm going to jump to you, John, actually, because the Newcastle situation, we talked about quite a lot on this pod. So what's your take on it? And what do you think of Eddie Howe as well to guide them into this next stage of their development?
I think what Dave said is pretty accurate. At the end of the day, if they do go down, which, you know, barring a run of good results quite quickly, they're going to need to win 50% of the next 10 games to even really be considered not relegation fodder, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's no easy task. But if they do go down, he's a proven manager in the lower levels, and he's also done it at Premier League level. So 100%, you know, 2-3 years, where if they do get relegated, I would imagine they'll come straight back up. I think you're right as well, Mike, when you're talking about fringe players from other clubs. Instantly, they were linked with Lingard. So I think there'll be a few people like that they're looking at for a bit of flair, a bit of talent that aren't going to break the bank. But let's be realistic, irrelevant of kind of takeover and how much money and things they've got on the loopholes with sponsorship and financial fair play. This isn't Man City or Chelsea of the last sort of 2 decades where they just throw money at players, like transfer fees and wages, get whoever they want and build this like absolute monster over the course of a couple of years. This is like a longer project. It's going to take, especially if they get relegated, that puts them a whole year behind. If they stay in the Premier League, I think that maybe in 18 months' time, we'll be saying they'll be linked with some actual big names if they can sort of be around the knock-ins of top 7. They might attract a few numbers, but they've got to deliver that first. Why do you want to go and play for Newcastle? West Ham made a mistake years ago, funny enough. They were throwing money at players that were either always injured or looked good for one season, and it just didn't get them anywhere. So they can fall into that trap and still be a bit of a yo-yo club. They need to have a bit of consistency, get in there or thereabouts for silverware, because big players want to win silverware.
Yeah,
you know,
I think you're right. I think if they're knocking on the door of the top 10 even at the minute, that's progress, isn't it? But put yourself in the position of the Newcastle fans at the moment and the way they've acquired this much wealth all of a sudden. Does that sit easy with you? I mean, if, as a West Ham fan with that much money coming from where it's coming from, how would you feel about that?
I mean, you see everyone dressing up when they got taken over. It's all very well and good when it's close to home and you get money thrown at you. But I think a lot of other people and someone with a little bit of, well, just being humble and honest, like it's not where you want your money to come from, really. And again, if they do win something in the next 3-4 years, whatever it might be, irrelevant of the cup, whether that's like the League Cup, if they can win the FA Cup or be there or thereabouts for the Premier League, they're only going to be called out by other fans because they just have money thrown at them. It's not done on merit. You know, no one's built anything up over to build a legacy. It's purely just money again. And that's why people were frustrated with clubs like Chelsea, not as much now, but because that's kind of been and gone. But they've still got to that point through heavy investment. City, the same thing. A lot of people that are proper fans are like, and you hear the jokes and like see the memes going around of, the old Chelsea fans bought a Man City shirt. The old Man City fans are now buying the Newcastle shirt because it's like they just follow the money and want to follow success. So I think if you're a true football fan, you probably don't want your money coming from there. But at the same time, if you know it's in your club, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do about it. You can protest all you want, but it's still there. So I guess you might as well enjoy it, I suppose. Although morally, I don't necessarily. It doesn't sit right with me, but.
I think it's the feeling of like hollowness if your team does win something, like you said, that it would just be expected, really, if you're throwing that much cash at a club, rather than an out of the blue FA Cup win or something like that for the likes of, you know, Wigan in the past. You know, that's the biggest day of their lives. Yeah, if Man City win the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup, it's kind of like, well, it's just another trophy, isn't it? It's just a weird, bittersweet feeling. But speaking of bittersweet feelings, Dave, Manchester derby. So should we touch on that quickly? The only manager I'm surprised still in a job is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because we thought he was out the door a fortnight ago, but he's still clinging on somehow. And yet Tottenham have got Antonio Conte. So when United did beat Tottenham the other day, who came off better out of that, do you think, Dave?
Well, no words. Yeah, obviously, you know, Tottenham have done well to get a manager like Conte in. And the funny thing is, I think it's strange that United, you know, they're coming out and there's murmurs that apparently they're looking for the long term, a manager that can, you know, invest in youth and look to build towards a long term project. And the thing is, the Tottenham Spurs have only, you know, given an 18-month contract to Conte, so it's not a huge gamble, you know. And I'm sure Daniel Levy's learnt from his last few managerial appointments. And I feel as though that's why he's only given him an 18-month contract, just to see, you know, how he does and how he come, you know, because he's a proven winner, Conte, and that's the thing that really annoys me with United is that, you know, they seem to have gone away from this. You know, the club, you know, United has always been, it seems to be built to win as a club, but it doesn't seem like there's that mentality there anymore. It's almost a business first and then football secondary. And, you know, it just shows through everything, you know, that how we're run at the moment. There's clearly no succession plan for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and whether, you know, and that is bizarre in itself, because the team, how many ups and downs have we had since Solskjaer's been in? You know, you did absolutely brilliant. You know, you did absolutely brilliant when he came in as an interim and, you know, went on that run. But then I think he signed the permanent contract 2 weeks after he got absolutely smashed by Everton. Yeah, and there's been peaks and troughs. I wouldn't even say peaks. I would say there's been
moments of hope. I think that's the thing. We've had moments of hope. Come back against PSG.
We've won a couple of games, and he gets himself out of trouble. But it's almost like he's constantly in survival mode, and that's why I don't understand why we're in this position. I didn't even want to come on here and talk about this today because I feel so fed up about it. So it's just depressing, and it actually mentally drains you talking about it and thinking about it, because you're almost resigned to nothing being done about it. It almost feels as though it's acceptable for us to lose 5-0 to Liverpool, your biggest rivals. It's acceptable to get absolutely battered by Man City. And that was a battering. That was worse than the scoreline. I watched that game and we had one shot on goal, and that was Ronaldo, a volley in the first half. After that, I don't think we got near their goal until I think it was the last minute. We had 4 touches in their box in the whole game. It was an absolute battering. City didn't even get out of second gear. They could have gone on and scored more goals if they wanted to. They didn't even have to make a substitute. and Pep was questioned after the game, saying, well, why didn't you make a substitute? And he was like, well, we're all comfortable. I didn't need to change anything. That tells you everything you need to know about us at the minute. We're a soft touch. The last victory that Dean Smith had was against Man United, and he's not won a game since then. Everton beat drew with United, and they went on a winless streak for games after that. If you want to play an easy team at the minute, it's Man United, and that's how embarrassing it is at the minute to look at the team, because we are an absolute shambles. And the thing is now, it's only starting to turn because you're having some legends coming out saying, for instance, I've seen Paul Ince talking about United and saying, it's not good enough, and, kind of calling Solskjaer out for it. And you've had, I think, Scholes is the only one who's kind of said it how it is. It almost feels as though these ex-players have got the best interests of their mate rather than, the club that supposedly they love, Man United, and they're more bothered about protecting their mate in charge of the club when, we're being dragged through like ridicule and humiliation. It's almost like, because it's happened with Mourinho, Van Gaal, and David Moyes, that we've had this absolute shitstorm over the last 8 years, and we're not really bothered now. We've already know how it works, and it feels like how it did with David Moyes. It's that low now where we have a bad result, and I'm just kind of resigned to. You don't even feel any emotion to it anymore. You're not angry.
What you're touching on, Dave, is that when we had David Moyes in charge, there was such a lack of ambition from him. Like when he was interviewed in games, after games, and we got beaten by a team like Liverpool, he just kind of accepted it as the way we were at the moment, and Liverpool was so far ahead. Solskjaer kind of talks like that, doesn't he? Like we are a top 10 team trying to break into the top 4 and not Manchester United. It's really sad to see that kind of almost defeatist attitude from the off. And he started the game against City really defensive as well, which is just kind of suicide. He stuck to the same 5-3-2/3-5-2 formation as well because it worked against Tottenham. It's not going to work against City at all, is it? It's just so tactically inept and naive that I don't know why we're surprised, to be honest. But I'm going to ask John to jump in on the United situation, because I think Dave's had his say plenty. But from an outsider looking in, we were looking at the Liverpool drubbing and going, can't get much lower than this. And Dave even said, it's a pivotal kind of run for the club, and we've got to do something because so much rests on it. We've stuck with Solskjaer. The run's getting worse. When do you think United are going to go, enough is enough?
There's a few things. So I was speaking to a couple of my mates about it as well. And Solskjaer's on a crazy long contract that's going to cost a lot of money to come out of, obviously. It's not like he's on a 1 or 2 year contract. So I think that might be part of it. The people that they've got in, you look at someone like Maguire, he gets ridiculed quite a lot, looks good for England, but then week in, week out, doesn't really seem like a consistent Premier League player. Varane, great signing. But again, a bit like West Ham of old, you sign someone that thinks it's going to be wicked, but they've got a bit of an injury history. You can't hit form if you're injured constantly, and he's meant to be one of your rocks at the back that just isn't present at all. And then you look at the people around Harry Maguire. Lindelof is a bit hit and miss. I don't know, Eric Bailly as well. Is he still injured or what? But again, it's another one that's just I think the core of your team, De Gea, a couple of seasons ago had a bad season, but he's looked really good this year again, and has got his confidence back, obviously, luckily. Otherwise, some of the games would have been even worse than what they are. But so I think one big thing is Solskjaer got massively long contracts. They just don't want to get rid of him, I don't think. And for whatever reason, they don't feel there's anyone out there at the minute. The fans will very quickly get on the back of the board and it'll start being a bit more spiteful, I think, come Christmas if the results don't turn quite quickly. The games you're having, from a neutral perspective, they're entertaining because you're either getting smashed or you win in the 90th minute, and there's a lot of goals. So watching it is, like chalk and cheese. It's a bit weird. And again, it's not how I've been raised with United. I used to watch them, a bit like West Ham are now. They're entertaining to watch. Obviously, West Ham have won like nothing compared to United ever. But what I mean is, in the kind of style of play, it's a good watch from a neutral perspective. I used to love watching United in the early 2000s, well, all through 2000s, really. They were just fantastic. The way they countered, the passion of the players, the consistency, like the week in, week out. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. I loved it. And the kind of magic around the club just seems to have gone with Ferguson, really. Ever since then, you've not kind of got that consistency. So, and yes, saying about legends, and a really good point. You've got people now coming out. Roy Keane made a really good point on Sky Sports, where you're sitting on the coach, you're looking around at the players around you, and you're thinking, Harry Maguire's there, has he got my back? You got Wan-Bissaka, or people that just, none of them are informed. Fred, how is he getting in the team? He wouldn't play for West Ham, or probably Everton, let alone half of the teams in the Premiership. Why he's doing that, I've got no idea. And Pogba, if he hasn't got the passion or whatever at the minute, fine. But at least he's got more talent. You might as well just throw him in the team week in, week out. Hope that he signs a new contract if you start delivering like a few results come New Year. But that's again from Solskjaer. Whether it's a bit of arrogance from him, being like, I'm not going to play you because you're not signing a contract. And then he's just shooting himself in the foot and falling on his sword. It's like a sum of all the parts. Yeah. I don't think Solskjaer is a bad manager. I don't think Man United got a specifically bad team. I just think that there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between the fans, the manager and the team as a triangle, and they're not really trying to lift each other up. When the team is getting picked, they're just not doing what's needed. It's like they don't know their right. The opposite of kind of the direction West Ham have gone in. They know their place in the team, what they're expected of. United have regressed massively in that. They don't look disciplined. There's no real passion. It's just all a bit like, meh.
And I think to a point, like the Atalanta game, we were 2-0 down at half time and the fans were fantastic. They sort of saved it for United. So for them to suddenly be turning is kind of no surprise. We've just lost to our two biggest rivals at home by an aggregate of 7-0, which is ridiculous when you say it like that. So I think the fans have done their part. I really do. And I think it's only now we're getting pushed to our very limit of patience that we need to see something change. I think we've now realised that Solskjaer's just not good enough. I think we realised that a while ago, but you want to see him succeed. I think that's what all his mates are doing. They want to see him succeed, but he's not going to. So I'll ask you again, John, I'll go back to you. Who would succeed with this Man United team? What kind of manager can take them forward? And would it have been Antonio Conte?
Randomly, I think someone like Eddie Howe would have been a good shout. If you're looking at longevity, I just think if you look at Conte or anyone that's available at the minute, he would have cost a lot of money. And I think even the way he plays, there would have had to be money for no signings in the new year. Where you haven't got this infinite pot of money anymore. I spent a lot over the last few seasons. I think your net spend is something like really like massive. Sancho's not even playing. Spent crazy money for him as well. I just don't. What is the identity? Like, what are you trying to achieve? That's what I don't really understand as a neutral looking in. Like, what's the direction of the club?
Yeah, Dave, what do you want to see next?
Players and not even playing.
Yeah, Dave, what do you want to see next then?
A change in manager. Ideally, I'd like to see a change from the top, but it's not going to happen. I'd like to see, if it was me, and it almost seems like, because what United, it seems like they're saying is they don't want to make a change because there's no viable candidates for the position at the moment, which is why they don't want to make a change in manager, because basically it's not realistic that they can go and get Ten Hag or they can go and get the manager that they want in the position right now. So what they're trying to say is, or it seems as though they're happy to ride the season out, even the way it's going right now, hoping that we get top four. But if top four, is in jeopardy or looks to be in jeopardy, it's already in jeopardy.
Yeah.
You look. That was probably the worst thing that could have happened for United yesterday, that West Ham beat Liverpool, because it showed that they're a competitor for the top four. And the more that these teams build, and the further we fall behind, we're climbing a mountain already. What are we? 9 points behind Chelsea. We played Chelsea after Watford, so we could be 12 points behind them. That's even if we get by Watford. And you can't. Thing is, you can't look past one game with United at the minute, because you know that no game's going to be an easy game. We've not played well once this season, apart from against Leeds I think it was the first game of the season. Every other game has been average or absolutely awful. And that's been the story of our European campaign as well. Ronaldo's bailed us out in pretty much every game. We could be bottom of the group and out of the Champions League already. So
In terms of managers, who is there that's really about at the minute that any club could get? So say Chelsea wanted to change managers, obviously they don't, but just someone that's obviously got a lot of pull. Like where would you even look?
The difference is Chelsea go out there and get the manager they want, even if he's 4 years in a contract, say at Ajax, and they have to pay 20 million to get him out of that contract. They go out there and do it because they aren't scared of spending pennies, whereas United don't want to.
Who is there? That's what I mean. That's what I'm asking. Like, genuinely, I don't even know who isn't in a job or near the end of a contract. So I can't think of anyone that's a big name or someone that needs to build up a little bit again. You know,
obviously there's Zidane out there, but there's rumours whether he's interested in going to England, and apparently he might want this France job next. So I think he's holding out for that. You've got obviously Ten Hag. There's Ralph Rangnick, obviously. Yeah. Who's apparently interested in taking the role until the end of the season, and then apparently he wants the director of football at the end of the season, which the Glazers are immediately going to turn their nose up to that because they don't want anybody having any sort of control over the club other than them, which is ridiculous. That is probably the best scenario that can happen, is he comes in until the end of the season and comes into the director of football, because we need somebody with some experience in a football, in a director of football role, to come in and give us some direction, because there's no direction. There's absolutely nothing at the minute.
No. Okay, with that in mind then, let me ask you both, who do you think is next to jump off the managerial merry-go-round? Is it going to be Solskjaer, or do you think there's another manager with the head further on the chopping block than him? It's just Solskjaer, isn't it? It literally is.
Yeah.
the other clubs, you've got to think about it, really. I think Burnley have obviously been struggling up until this weekend against Chelsea. Sean Dyche, there's not really a better manager, is there, with that team and that personnel at Burnley? They're not the greatest. They're probably, one of the worst, really, in terms of quality of player. But he manages to get the best out of those players. So you've got to think that a lot of the managers that are in there at the moment, almost Hassan Hutel, he's turned it around with Southampton. They're looking really good again. So everyone really kind of has a good quite settled, in their roles. So there's no other name, is there? It's a matter of time. It's just a matter of time now. It's not if, it's going to happen.
It is. I think United fans, though, are thinking anyone but Solskjaer at the moment. We'd even sort of take anybody on the short term. I think Rangnick's a great option. I think Zidane is probably one of those ones that's not great to come in and fight a fire right now. He probably wants a bit more stability.
I think the one thing, and they're playing with fire, really, the owners at the minute, because you've got to remember, this is now, we're in 2021 now, nearly 2022. The new generation of Man United fans didn't even see the 99 final. They just know that Solskjaer is a legend of the club and scored a last-minute goal to win the Champions League. So there's no emotional ties with the new generation with Solskjaer. It's all the old boys that,
it reminds me when I was growing up in the 90s, Liverpool were living off similar success, and they were always talking about the 70s and the 80s, and it was always Liverpool looking at how they were the most dominant team in England 20 years ago, and United are in that same position, and they had Roy Evans as the manager, and I said this before, they left him in charge for too long before they put Howe in charge back in the day. And if they'd have got rid of Roy Evans when they had the Spice Boys team, of McManaman and Fowler, because they were a good team, and put somebody good in charge of them, they'd have won trophies. And United are in the same boat. If they don't get rid of Solskjaer now, they'll miss the boat, and those good players will move on. And they need a coach in charge of them that can actually whip them into shape. Because they're so far from competing, aren't they?
You're right about that. The players that we've got now, it's almost now or never, because you've got Pogba there, who's, let's be honest, looks like he's going to leave in the summer. But you've got Van der Beek, he's apparently wants to leave in January. But if a new manager comes in, these players might see it as a new opportunity. Sancho, surely he's got to be thinking, what on earth have I come in for to play under this manager? I'm not getting any chance whatsoever. They've paid 80 million for me, and they're now playing a system where I don't even fit into. What is it, 3-5-2 or 5-3-2 or whatever you want to call it, and it's just disheartening. So disheartening.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about United anymore. I feel like we waste too much breath on them. it's just one of them things that just rumbles on. And every week he stays in a job, it feels like we've got more moaning to do because he's still there. And it's always off the back of an awful result as well, with the exception of the Tottenham game. But nobody got excited on the back of that because we knew it was just extending his stay a little bit longer. And I don't want to get into sort of Arsene Wenger territory when Arsenal fans were wishing Arsenal to lose just so Wenger could leave, because, you know, that's a negative, toxic way to sort of support your club. But there needs to be some action, doesn't there, at the top somewhere, just to show the club's still got ambition, you know?
I think it's different this time. I think it is just a matter of time now. I just saw a video before I came on here, actually, Rio Ferdinand he has that Vibe with Five podcast, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he was saying that it feels now as though it's time to pass the baton on. You know, he came in and he changed things. He made it feel like Manchester United was a good, you know, had a good feeling to be around now, and the players enjoyed playing again after Mourinho. And it feels as though he's just hit a wall now, and it's time for a change. So,
on that note, we'll leave it there. I think United have dominated too much conversation. But John, amazing to have you back, mate.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Dave, thanks so much for your input again on United. I know it winds you up so much, but do you know what? It's good to watch. It's good entertainment. If you do like what you see, please subscribe to our channel. We're on Spotify as well, so just give us a follow on there as well. All our socials are in the top corner if you want to follow us on there. But in the meantime, guys, I think the next time the pod happens, it will be after International Week, won't it? So it's always a weird vibe when that comes along, because England are playing like San Marino and nothing really to get excited about. But enjoy. Thanks again, guys, for your time, and I'll see you soon.
Cheers.